Hi, everybody. Welcome to Halftime Live on Brew Sports. It is a Wednesday edition of the program. Still no Tanner Burke. We are on day 7 of Tanner Burke Watch. We are trying to figure out if he will ever return to Brew Sports. I have heard that he's found his way to the Pony Express, and he's riding his way back to Wisconsin as we speak. So, Lord willing, he doesn't get detoured somewhere and end up in Buffalo or some other godforsaken city. So, hopefully, he finds his way back here. I've heard rumors he will be back tomorrow. So, Lord willing, that will end up being the case. However, has been the theme of the week. I've got another great guest co-host today. It is Scott Wisniewski. It's great to see you again, Scott. Welcome back to Brew Sports. How are you?
You know what? It's great to be here. I don't know. I'm going to try to bring the energy. I don't know if I can bring Tanner Burke energy. I don't know if anybody can.
I don't know if anybody
legally
can. Yes, exactly. Legally, I don't know. We've refrained from putting any of our guest co-hosts through any of our off-the-rails craziness that we've been doing, so we won't try to cut your hair or duct tape you or throw a pie in your face.
Well, I do
today.
need a haircut.
So, you do? Well, so then maybe we might. We missed an opportunity, I feel like, then. We could have helped you out. But, Scott, obviously, it's great to have you back on the program. We are going to have a good friend of our show, Alfredo Moente, joining us as well. To give us the latest news in the MLB world, talking about a couple of legacies for some household names right now. Albert Pujols, Joe Madden, Bryce Harper as well, too. So Alfredo's going to be here in a little bit to give us a little bit more inside information when it comes to all of that great business. So we've got a lot of good stuff to get to today as we continue to roll along with the program. We do, of course, invite you to engage with us on all forms of the social media universe, whether that be on the great Facebook, on YouTube, or on Spreaker.com. We are all over the place, so make sure you hang out with us today. We do say hello to Jeff and Greg and David and everybody else, Bryce, tuning in. If you got any thoughts or whatever, we'd love to hear from you. And apparently, according to Facebook, Scott, this is our 250th broadcast, apparently, for Brew Sports. So there we go. So
milestones.
They just popped up. They said, congrats, this is your 250th broadcast. Well, thanks, Facebook. This has been fun. Well, there you go. Now we have even more reason to party today, Scott. I'm looking forward to it. All right. So the way we do it on Wednesdays is we say, what's up Wednesday? We say, what's up with the sports world? I'm going to go right off the bat and say, what's up with Tom Brady and Gisele? If you haven't heard about this, apparently last season Tom Brady had a concussion, and nobody knew about it except for his wife. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I tell my wife a lot of things, and don't tell the public world, but Gisele was the one that actually told everybody, saying, yeah, Tom had a concussion, and he played through it, and he was completely fine. My question to you, Scott, when you hear this, do you have more respect or less respect for Tom Brady, knowing that he did what he did last season while also suffering concussions?
I don't have any more or less respect. I think Tom Brady's great, and he's done great things. I think he's risked severe health complications by not reporting it, but he also did miss the first 4 games of the season, and he probably wanted to make sure he didn't miss any more on his team's run to the playoffs and then ultimately a Super Bowl champion. I do think, though, with what we know nowadays, you're really kind of taking some real risks when you don't report those.
Right, I agree. I mean, he's going to be 40 this season. I mean, obviously he's playing at a level higher than even some of the young guns that are in the league right now, but he said it was just something that he wanted to keep to himself, and he said that kind of aggression, he said, all the time is certainly not very healthy for you, but he's been very blessed to not have a lot of head injuries throughout his career, hence why he was able to play through it and not really have to deal with too much. He did suffer some other issues earlier on in his career, but this really hasn't seemed to have stemmed into anything else that he's got going on right now. Right. So Tom Brady, as we mentioned, suffering a concussion last season, appears to be just fine, though. And, of course, winning Super Bowl will certainly justify that as well. So, Scott, what is up in your sports world today?
I want to know what's up with the NBA draft lottery.
Oh, Lord.
And, first of all, this year Boston becoming the first team to have their best record in their conference and then have the number 1 pick, but that came because they had New Jersey's pick. Mm-hmm. New Jersey was pretty terrible this year, so it was weighted in their favor. A couple things about the draft lottery and the draft in general. There have been speculations in the past at certain times that the draft lottery may not have been on the up and up. Yes. Maybe the envelope was frozen before it got picked back in the 80s so that the Knicks could be able to draft Patrick Ewing, whatever the case may be. I think the excitement for the draft lottery has gone down considerably, not because of the way they kind of weight it and it's not based on record, because I kind of like that it's not based on record, so you don't have teams that tank. I think the draft as a whole has become a little bit watered down because of so many one-and-done players that enter the draft. Now, some of those players turn out to be great NBA players. A lot of them don't because there's just not enough body of work and I think not enough development in their overall game. So you might have the second or third pick overall, fourth pick overall, and you're drafting a kid who essentially ends up being a project.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, you look at what the Philadelphia 76ers have done, and they've had so many top picks. You would think they'd be a playoff team by now.
Yeah.
But the fact that they're getting guys who are one-year players in a lot of cases and some that have some injury history, but whatever it is, they become projects. It's not like a lot of these guys come and contribute right away and become stars. So
I agree.
I think it's watered things down, so my excitement for the NBA draft isn't nearly to what it is my excitement for the NFL draft. And it used to be, when I was younger, on an even par. But I just think the game has changed now, and you're drafting a lot of guys that aren't going to necessarily contribute in year 1 or 2.
And that's the biggest thing that always bothers me about the NBA draft as well, too. You look at what goes into it with all these 18, 19-year-old kids that are trying to, make a fast buck almost. They're like, oh, I'm making my millions finally playing in the NBA. It's diluting the teams, like you mentioned. In theory, if you're the Philadelphia 76ers or you're the Minnesota Timberwolves, you should be far better than you actually are because of in theory, the players that you're drafting. But you're getting 18-year-old kids. You're not getting NFL-ready players that are, 23, 24, that have played a couple of years of college sports, that actually understand the game and aren't still trying to figure out, how to still tie their shoes at times.
Yeah, and I still wish the NBA had an age minimum. It can be 20. I mean, 2 years might be a little bit better.
I'm completely fine with that. 2 years is way better than 1.
Agreed. So, I don't know if that will ever change, but I'm not as excited about it as I used to.
I agree. Looking in the comment section here briefly, if folks are letting the Patriots have it, there's a shocker. Greg says the Patriots are going down, down, down. David said that was a bad call on Tom's part. If you're married to Giselle, you want to live as long as possible, and that is absolutely true. And Jeff wants to know how Brady figured this out. Did he have a private physician? I don't know those details, Jeff. Bryce also says, do you think the feud between the Patriots and Goodell have anything about Brady staying in? He certainly says that he believes that would be the case. I mean, because if you're trying to prove to the NFL, if you are Tom Brady, that, listen, I don't care what your suspensions are. I don't care if I got a concussion. I'm going to stay in. I'm going to stick it to the man, as they say. This certainly would have been a reason for it. And now that this information had come out, if he had not won the Super Bowl and this information had come out, I think there would have been a lot more, speculation being like, well, this is why they didn't win it.
And I think had they not won a Super Bowl, maybe the information would never have come out.
That is true.
The source is his wife.
Does it make it more impressive, I guess?
I think so. I think maybe when she told the story, Giselle, she's like, well, hey, this is even cooler.
Right.
As opposed to had they not won and say, well, he was a little banged up. They might not have talked about it.
Right. So. Exactly. Last thing for what's up in the sports world, if you had just tuned into Bruce Sports a little over an hour ago, you saw that we had a breaking news segment saying that LeGarrette Blount has officially signed a 1-year contract with the Philadelphia Eagles. He will be able to make up to $2.8 million. He joins Darren Sproles in the backfield now. Philadelphia has been kind of this weird where running backs go to die. I feel like LaShawn McCoy's career almost completely plummeted when he was there for a short time.
Well, that was Chip Kelly's fault.
Right, right, exactly. You'd like to think now that Doug Peterson is going to try to rejuvenate what's going on. What does this do now for Philadelphia with a veteran? He's only been in the league for 7 years. He's got a Super Bowl. He scored 18 touchdowns last year. What does this do for LeGarrette Blount and the Eagles now, in your opinion?
It gives them a different facet of their offense that they didn't have with Sproles or with Ryan Matthews.
Yes.
We know now every team needs 2 or 3 running backs that have different styles that can share the load. It's a good signing for them. I mean, here locally, there was some talk months ago about, well, maybe the Packers are going to sign Blount. Yep. Obviously, when they draft 3 running backs, that's clearly not in the cards. But I think he's a guy that can help some teams. He had a great season, a couple great seasons in New England. He struggled in some other places away from New England. So I'm interested to see how he does in a system that's not led by Bill Belichick.
Yeah, and that's going to be a big thing for me too, is to see where LeGarrette Blount's career moves forward for now. People forget that he was drafted by Tampa Bay. He was a big time player when he first came out. Then he spent a little time, of course, up in Pittsburgh, and then he's really made a name for himself the last 2 years with the New England Patriots. Patriots, of course, helping contribute winning a Super Bowl. I didn't realize until I was looking up stats before the show that he scored 18 touchdowns last year. That blows my mind.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It is.
And you look at him, and I kind of compare him the same way I compare Randy Moss. Randy Moss, after his initial run in Minnesota, had some struggles, and then he went to New England and looked like he righted the ship a little bit, and then, wasn't the same when he left there. So
I agree. All right, let us know your thoughts about that in the comments section as we continue to roll along with the program. Greg asks you a question. Scott, he says, is there anything new going on in Scott's life? Any new radio or journalism gigs? Apparently a fan of yours, Greg.
Well, there's our podcast, the Kielbasa King Sports Extravaganza. We do that mostly every week.
You had some fun people on recently.
Yeah,
didn't
we
you?
had Yancey and Mays, two of the Packer draft picks, on in the last couple of
That's awesome.
Last week, essentially. So you can find us there. We're also exploring some weekend radio slots now with our podcast. It's been 5 years plus strong and going.
Very exciting.
So yeah, check it out.
There you go. Well, phenomenal. For those of you that are Scott Wisniewski fans, you just got the 411 on what's going on there
all
with
five
Scott.
of you.
All five of you. Maybe six when, your mom or somebody tunes in or the cat walks into the room. But all right, speaking of fans, we're a big fan of the work that Alfredo Muente does on the Brew Sports Network. He is one of our great MLB correspondents. Recently in the baseball world, we've seen some pretty crazy things happen. Joe Madden just captured his 1,000th victory as a manager. Albert Pujols just moved up to 11th all-time on the RBIs list. And then Bryce Harper, the man, the myth, the legend, just finally capped off his bingo checklist of hitting a home run in every single National League ballpark. And it starts to beg the question. You hear the L word a lot, the legacy question. What are the legacies? And one of the men that knows a lot about that is Alfredo Muente. Alfredo, welcome back to Halftime. How are you, sir?
I'm doing fine, thank you. And by the way, I am a Scott Wisniewski fan as well.
So there you go. We are up to 7 now. There we go. The pool is growing.
Oh, great. Well, 2 more, and I have a baseball team.
There you go.
So,
exactly.
There we go.
Yeah. Perfect. I can switch it, I guess, sometimes. So, Alfredo, talking about, let's start with Albert Pujols, moving up to 11th all-time on the RBI's all-time list. Albert Pujols, obviously, for me, at least as a kid growing up, I knew him as the guy in St. Louis that was hitting the laces off the ball and home runs left and right. But obviously, he's out in Anaheim now, still doing pretty successful with his career, even though he's kind of on the tail end of it. But talk to me about your thoughts on the recent performance from Pujols, but also your take on his legacy as well.
Well, undoubtedly, Baxter, Albert Pujols is one of the greatest hitters of all time. There's no way that you can get around that. He's 37-year-old now, and he continues to be a key cog in a team that right now, unfortunately, is a 500 team. The Angels have not been playing well. They're 21-21 this season, and they struggled mightily last year. So if not for Mike Trout and Albert Pujols, this team, I don't know how far down they would be in the American League West. But to look at a guy that back in 2001, like you said, broke in with the Cardinals. He was Rookie of the Year. He had 37 home runs and had 130 RBI. And that was in his rookie season. Almost did what Mark McGwire did for the A's in his rookie campaign. But you look at the rest of his bio, I mean, this guy has done pretty much everything. He's a 3-time National League MVP, all those with St. Louis. He's a 10-time All-Star. He's done that both in the National and the American League. 2-time Gold Glove winner. He's won 6 Silver Slugger Awards. He was the National League batting champion back in 2003. And overall, if you look at his entire career, he's a .308 hitter. And that is something that's fantastic. 596 career home runs. So he is 4 from getting to 600. It's just a matter of time on when he'll get that. It could be even later this week or next week. And like you said, 11th on the all-time RBI list, passing Carl Yastrzemski. And when you're passing guys like that, that have black and white pictures on their records, you know that you're doing something good.
Let me ask you this about Pujols. Maybe you don't have to put him in the top 5 of all-time right-handed hitters, but of his era, he's got to be one of the best right-handed hitters in the last 20 years.
Absolutely. I think he and Miguel Cabrera are the 2 best right-handed hitters, without a doubt, over the last 20 years, like you said, really. And if you look at what Albert Pujols has done historically, if you want to put him in the Hall of Fame, which he will be a first-ballot Hall of Famer 5 years after he retires. But if you look at his WAR scoring system with wins above replacement, he is second all-time behind anybody in the history of the league, behind only a guy you may have heard of named Lou Gehrig. So now, at the end of it all, after hindsight's 2020, we don't know how much higher Miguel Cabrera is going to be on that list. But certainly, if you take a look at the entire body of work for Albert Pujols, this is a guy that will finish in the top 5, of course, all time at first base.
I think that's Lou Gehrig calling you right now saying, hey, wait a minute there, Alfredo. I think people may have heard of me before.
By the way,
Sorry.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to say this. This is something I've held near and dear to my heart for 40-plus years I've been on this earth. I still believe Lou Gehrig was the greatest player of all time, and what makes me feel that way is he batted behind a guy who for decades was the home run champion and still drove in all those runs, even though the bases were usually empty when he was batting. So I think Lou Gehrig, a lot of times people forget how good he was because he played with a guy named Babe Ruth. But to me, historically, out of the players I've never had a chance to see live, Lou Gehrig's number one in my book.
Yes, I would agree with you.
I think I would agree to the fact that Lou Gehrig is one of the top players, and yes, he did play behind in the shadow of Babe Ruth. But I like to look at guys, more importantly, when I do my analysis of who was better at their prime, looking not just at their body of work, but who really was the more dominant player during his prime in the years that he played. And, of course, Ken Griffey Jr., a guy that just got into the Hall of Fame last year, would have to be among the top guys in your list. And, of course, Willie Mays as well, two outfielders. But if you are looking at infielders, absolutely, Lou Gehrig has to be number one. He's the greatest first baseman ever.
Well, one of the guys that's making an argument for the greatest manager ever is Joe Madden, and he celebrated his 1,000th victory with a nice fine glass of red wine during his post-game press conference. Kind of par for the course, I feel like, for Joe Madden with the funny outfits and now having some wine to celebrate as well. But won a World Series last year, of course, as the manager of the Cubs. Alfredo, how do you review Joe Madden and his potential legacy moving forward?
Well, it's interesting, Baxter, because Joe Madden, actually, a lot of people don't know, but he had actually very brief managerial stints in the 90s with the Angels. He was the bench coach there, but he also had a chance to manage back in 1996 and in 99. And then, of course, became the full-time manager of the Tampa Bay Devil Rays back in 2006. Of course, I've had a chance here in the Tampa Bay area to watch him manage a lot in the 9 years that he was in Tampa Bay. I mean, to put it into perspective, Joe Madden managed almost 1,500 games in Tampa Bay. The next closest was their original skipper, Larry Rothschild, who finished with 499. So
wow.
Almost 1,000 more managed games. And this is for a franchise that is just 20 years old this year. So you got to give him credit for that. But he currently now, with his 1,000 victories, is 62nd on the on-time win list with 1,871 to go. Now, of course, he's not going to get to John McGraw's numbers and Connie Mack's numbers, those guys who won over 3,000 games. Those marks are untouchable, but he has certainly been able to do what he can with the teams that he's been given. He came into Tampa Bay with a bad team. 2 years later, he got him into the World Series and was an American League championship. He's a 3-time manager of the year in the American League, and now, of course, with the Chicago Cubs, the defending world champion. And, of course, he broke the curse 108 years later, and I think Joe Madden certainly has plenty more to go. I mean, he's 63 years young, and we know that he could probably manage for probably 10 or 15 more years.
Help me come to grips with something, because I was a fan of Madden's in Tampa Bay. He was one of the first managers to kind of embrace sabermetrics and some of the advanced stats, and even especially at his age. I mean, to be in his 50s and kind of being ahead of the curve, some of the guys his age. And I think he's a great manager, don't get me wrong. I don't know why I feel like I've grown a little bit tired of him. Maybe it's because he's with the Cubs and he's a little bit more overexposed than he was when he was in Tampa, and people really didn't pay attention to him like they should have. But I like him, and he's good. But why do I sometimes get irritated by him? Maybe help me, analyze me a little bit. Help me out.
I don't know. I mean, I can see where you're coming from in that regard, but certainly he's one of the best minds in the game. I mean, there are not too many people that are brighter, that are managing, or really at any aspect of Major League Baseball than Joe Madden. He certainly changed the culture around when he was in Tampa Bay, and is starting to do that now in his 2+ years with the Chicago Cubs. I mean, he's about as good as anybody making use of his 25-man roster. Then that's just about it. And all the zany things that go on with him, like you were talking about with, the different things that they do, the get-ups that they wear, the exotic animals they bring into the clubhouse and things. It's a different tactic, but, the players grow to love him. Everybody likes Joe Madden, and he pulls the right strings.
I think the only thing, too, is like you talk about Connie Mack. Nobody can ever be Connie Mack, because nobody could ever wear a wool blend suit in a dugout and manage games and pull it off like he did.
I feel like you could pull it off, Scott.
I would probably overheat and die.
And he did that for almost
summer.
He did that for almost a half a century, too, Connie Mack, wearing wearing that uniform, not the player's uniform, but the suits.
As some people might say, it was a different time.
Something
like that. One of the last people we want to talk about from a legacy standpoint, Bryce Harper, kind of doing something pretty cool. He has officially now hit a home run in every single National League ballpark. That's kind of a cool thing, considering he is a little bit still young in his career. I know some folks are saying, well, he's going to be the second coming of XYZ, or he's going to do this with his career. But how do you, Alfredo, as someone that studied the game for such a long time, and I know Scott as well as you, how do you view the legacy of Bryce Harper to this point, and what do you think it might become in the future?
Well, that's a great question, and I think it's a lot easier to look at somebody like Pujols, who we talked about a moment ago, because he's almost at the end of his career. Bryce Harper is not even into the prime of his career, and that's a scary thing to think of. I mean, the man has already been in the league, it seems like forever, 6 seasons now in Major League Baseball, and like you said, he's homered in all 15 National League parks and has played in 27 overall parks and has hit a home run in 23 of them. And the guy's not even 25 years old yet, not until October will he reach that plateau. I mean, he was the Rookie of the Year back in 2012 with the Nationals. He's already been to the All-Star game 4 times, and of course was the NL MVP, had that great season back in 2015. And a lot of people knock on him because he said, oh, well, he had a down year last year. He was better last year than in his rookie season. You know, the numbers will show that. He had more homers, he had more RBIs, he had more hits last year. He just had a down year for Bryce Harper. And when you compare him to himself like that, that's a pretty high bar to set. Now, this season, he leads the league in batting average, 388, in OPS, OPS plus, in runs scored. He already has 13 home runs and 36 RBI. That puts him second in the National League in that regard. I mean, I had a hard time at the beginning of the year thinking, okay, who's going to win the National League MVP award? Is it going to be Bryce Harper? Is he going to bounce back and have a 2015? Or is Chris Bryant going to do it again? I had a hard time deciding. It's becoming a lot more clear now, 6 weeks into the season, who the National League MVP is possibly going to be.
And historically, you look at some of the, I don't want to call them rivalries because they didn't dislike each other, but in the 60s, it was Mays and Aaron. Who was the best? Neck and neck. Do you see the same thing with Harper and Trout? I mean, these guys are young. They haven't even reached their prime yet. We could have 10, 12, 14 years of these two players being at the top of the game and having that age-old battle where we'll be talking to our grandkids and going, who was better, Trout or Harper? And the fact that we have the privilege to see them both playing, I think, is pretty amazing.
You're absolutely right, Scott. Yeah, these are two of if they continue what they're doing right now, they will be two of the better players ever to have played in Major League Baseball. And like you mentioned with Mays and with Aaron, another one was also the rivalry within teams like Maris and Mantle in 61. But yeah, you take a look at Trout and Harper. I think if you look at the advanced metrics, that Mike Trout is probably a tick better than Bryce Harper, only because of what he's been able to accomplish in the MVPs and the runner-up awards and such, right? As a defensive player, I think Mike Trout is a lot better than Bryce Harper is. But offensively, I think Bryce is catching up. And he is younger than Mike Trout, by the way. So I think that once it's all said and done, both of these guys are certainly first-ballot Hall of Famers if they keep this up. But I think it's a little too early to say. They will continue to, hopefully, if they can avoid injury.
I mean, they're incredible players, though. Even for somebody from my perspective that's not a huge baseball fan, you still know the names Bryce Harper and Mike Trout, and you still are enamored by the plays that they continue to make day in and day out. So I think it's good for the sport of baseball to have such young superstars at this point in this growth of Major League Baseball.
And it is, absolutely.
And, we look at the calendar, and we're less than 2 weeks away from Memorial Day. And the old adage is, this is when you start looking at the standings, right? You get to Memorial Day, teams have taken on their personality. It's 8 weeks in now, so you got a better look at what teams are. So that being said, I'm going to ask you about a couple teams, and I want to know if they are what they look like, what they appear to be. And we're going to start with Houston. And I'll be honest, I thought Houston could win their division. I wasn't expecting them to be playing at a 670 clip.
No, absolutely. And Houston, actually, they are a very good team. And they're a team that started their advanced metrics early on as well. They're one of the first teams that adopted this. And it's finally coming into fruition what they're doing. Ever since they moved into the American League, they've only really had one bad season. And you look at what they're doing now, 28-12. Right now, currently, the winning percentage is the best in Major League Baseball. And their home and away records are very interesting because they are exactly the same, a mirror image of one another. That's why they're so good, because they play as well at home at Minute Maid Park than they do on the road. They are both 14-6, both at home and on the road. And they're playing well. They're on a 3-game winning streak. They've got guys who have been injured, but Dallas Keuchel looks like he's back to form. He could win another Cy Young again this year. This man is unbelievable. Has a sub-2 ERA already with 7 victories. And yes, they do have a couple of injuries, but George Springer, is a guy that is looked upon to carry the team. Jose Altuve as well he was hitting the hand the other day, but he looks to be back in form as a guy that you can count on to play every day and get you 200 hits. And they have Alex Bregman, Yuli Gurrielski. I mean, they have a lot of guys, and the names they brought in too. They brought in a Josh Reddick to play in the outfield. They brought a veteran catcher in Brian McCann. So it's a good mix of veterans and young guys, and I'm excited to see what they can do.
I do have to say, too, just looking at the standings and the way they're all broken down, I just kind of laugh to myself when I see, like, the expanded statistics when you really look at it. Like, the fact that, Houston is 21-9 when they play in the evening, or they're 2-1 on turf. And some of those things, you kind of chuckle to yourself a little bit. It's like, who actually analyzes it that much? But, I mean, some people, obviously are very intent about that. I mean, it's good to know that the Astros are 2-4 against the Central. I mean, they're 17-6 when they play, West Conference teams. So like it's kind of funny, but it's also good to know as well too. I mean, it's like, oh, we're playing a night game. That should probably be a win if we're an Astros fan. But that's just my personal opinion.
Yeah. And the thing. No, I'm sorry. I was going to say the thing with the Houston Astros is that they're already 8 games up on both the Angels and the Rangers, and it's not even Memorial Day, like you said. So looking at the standings, they have a very, very comfy lead right now in the West.
I think those turf splits used to be skewed in the 70s and 80s when every National League park had that concrete like AstroTurf. Speaking of, we'll stay in the American League when we talk about teams that are surprising us. So we talk about the Astros. On the flip side, the Mariners, Royals, and Blue Jays are all in last place in their respective divisions. Of those 3 teams, which one can rebound and get back in these races and maybe make the playoffs? And which team did you expect to have the biggest fall off of those 3?
Well, you mentioned Toronto, Oakland, and Seattle. Were those the 3 you mentioned?
Kansas City, Seattle,
Kansas City.
Toronto.
Yeah. Okay, well, out of those 3 teams, to me, it's a no-brainer. I think that Toronto is the team that can certainly get back into this. When everybody was saying at the beginning of the year, they're off to the worst start, they had a historically bad start. They did. They had a lot of injuries. They were not hitting, and they were injured on both the pitching and the hitting side. But this is a team that's currently 17-23. Of course, that does not look good. But if you look at the way they started, they're starting to bounce back a little bit more now, and they're starting to play a little bit better at home, which is what they need to do. They're almost back to 500 at Rogers Center. So I do think that they'll be able to get back in. They're not a team that's going to make the playoffs. They're not a team that's even going to win the division or have any chance at that. But they're certainly one that can push some other teams to the limit, like Tampa Bay, and even a team like Boston, who seems to be struggling, even though they're 20-18. Out of those other teams, I would think that the Kansas City Royals are probably the worst out of those. I have no love for that team right now. 16-22, they have really hit the skids since having back-to-back World Series appearances, and really everything is just snowballing for them right now. And in a division which is a little bit lighter in the American League Central, where really the only powerhouse seems to be the Cleveland Indians, who are not even in first place. You see a team of Kansas City, and they have not been taking advantage of their lighter schedule.
Absolutely, and I know we've kept you a little bit longer, but I got one more. I want to jump over to the National League. Same thing. So on the good side, we'll stay on the good side. We won't talk about the Giants and the Mets. The Mets just can't seem to figure out. There are too many injuries and whatnot. But let's talk about the teams that have maybe overperformed. The Diamondbacks and the Rockies. Should I believe in them? Is Bud Black just that good that he's managed to find ways for pitchers to keep the ball in the ballpark in Colorado? Will both of these teams stick around for a while? Will one of them fall off? Well, what's your opinion?
Well, last week I wrote a blog about the Rockies and how well they're doing right now. If you go back and just in this decade alone, over the last 7 years, 3 times they've started out with winning records in the first 6 months. So this is a team that historically gets off to good starts. I don't know if they can really keep it around, but this is a different team than the ones prior. They were a team that in the last few years, they needed their offense to carry them. They just needed to outslug their opposition. But right now they've got fine pitching. Bud Black has come in and really changed things around, taking over for Walt Weiss, because you've got guys in there. Antonio Senzatella, nobody knew about him before the year started. Kyle Freeland just made his major league debut last month, and he's been pitching well, has yet to lose on the road. And, of course, they still have guys in their rotation that can carry their team and not the offense. They don't have to worry so much about that. They'll be fine with guys like Nolan Arenado, Carlos Gonzalez. Mark Reynolds is having a good bounce back here. But Trevor Story's on the DL right now, but he's another guy that also will contribute when he comes back. They're 12-5 away from home. And I think it's very important because everybody talks about the Coors factor and the fact that they hit in that rarefied air. Well, they're playing a lot better on the road, and their numbers show that. So because of their pitching and because of the fact that Greg Holland is yet to blow a save this year, this is a team that I think that can certainly stick around. You talk about the Arizona Diamondbacks. They have a much better offense than a lot of people thought. They scored a lot of runs last year. They're doing it again. And if they can keep a pace where they can score about 4 or 5 runs a game, on a weekly basis, they can stick around as well, and they can usurp the spots that we're going to go to. Everybody was saying the Dodgers and the Giants.
And real quick, Colorado's doing this with their pitching, and that's with John Gray on a disabled list. So, who's supposedly their best pitcher?
Yeah, exactly.
John Gray and Chad Bettis as well, who is still recovering from testicular cancer.
All right, Alfredo, we got to let you run, but we appreciate your insights as always. For those that want to keep up with your work, where can they find you on social media, sir?
Well, you can find me on Twitter at Alfredo_Muente, and then also you can read all my blogs on Blogger at alfredomuentebaseball.blogspot.com. And I just wanted to say one last thing. I am honored that I get to be a correspondent on this, the 250th show, and I also was honored to be on the very first ever show. So
that is very true. That is very true. It's coming full circle, Alfredo, but we appreciate it, sir.
Yes. All right, thank you so much, guys.
Yeah, we'll talk to you soon. There goes Alfredo Muente here on Halftime. Great to get his insights, and I know that the baseball stuff always just gets you all fired up, which is great to see, of course.
It does, and Alfredo's great.
He is.
We could talk forever.
He is. He's one of those guys who's like, let's go get a beer and talk for like 6 hours about baseball. It's like, all right, sounds good, let's go kind of thing. So, all right, well, one of the things that I feel like I can at least talk about fairly competent is the NFL. Right now, teams, of course, are still trying to figure out what's going on with their rosters coming into the mini camps and training camps. And one of the things that's been starting to work its way around the NFL right now, Scott, is who are the second-year players that are going to surge or slump? Who are the players that are going to potentially break out of their bad ways they had as a rookie, or who's going to disappoint? The names like Dak Prescott and Ezekiel Elliott come to mind with, are they going to keep up the same level of success? And, of course, you've got the other guys out there like the Carson Wentz's, the Jared Goffs, and others as well. But my question to you is, who are some of the second-year players in the NFL that are coming in this season, whether it be locally or domestic or nationally, that you're going to be keeping an eye on?
Well, let's start with the three quarterbacks of record, the three high-profile guys. With Prescott, I thought Prescott obviously overperformed what his expectations were. So my question has to be this. Unless you think he's Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers or even Matt Ryan, can he do anything but either plateau or slide? I mean, he had such a great year, and you wonder how teams are going to prepare for that. Although I still think he's going to be fine, especially with that offensive line and that running game. It's only natural to think that he might take a step back and still have a good year,
right?
But still take a step back. On the opposite end, how much worse can Goff get?
That's true. How much worse can the Rams get as a whole?
Right. So the natural projection was he's got to get better. I don't know that he'll ever be elite, but if he doesn't get better, it might be one of those situations where by year 3 he's looking for a job, because how long can you hold on to him, which is why I thought it was such a bad move for the Rams in the first place. They gave up a lot to do that, and I think they're just running a risk of burying their franchise because of what they gave up for it. And then you have Carson Wentz, who is really the guy in the middle, because you have Prescott here, you have Goff on this end, and then it's Wentz, who had a good start to the season.
He did.
Leveled off a little bit. Now we talked about LeGarrette Blount coming there, him getting a little bit more of a running game. But I think he's the one that I think has the best chance to go one way drastically or the other.
Yes.
I think you'll see a little bit of improvement from Goff and a little bit of regression from Prescott. I think Wentz is a wild card. He can go either way, and it's going to really decide and determine what kind of player he's going to be.
My biggest thing with all three of those guys, I look at Jared Goff. He's never going to be a successful quarterback until the Rams actually start caring, until they actually give him weapons to throw the ball to. And I understand certain players are just special, and they can make any player around them good. Not everybody's Tom Brady. He can't throw the ball to literally anybody the Patriots put on the field and still throw for 4,000 yards. That doesn't happen very often. So for folks that are out there saying, well, Jared Goff just needs to man up and just, embrace being an NFL quarterback a little bit more, that's not how it works. You have to sometimes, especially early on, you have to have those good players around you, and he doesn't have anybody to get the ball to.
Well, and the other thing I really learned, because for a while I had thought before last year, I thought Jeff Fisher was a good coach. I thought he was a guy that was really good and did some good things. And then I watched Hard Knocks with the Rams last year, and I really felt like he was a buffoon. I was shocked with how out of touch Jeff Fisher seemed to be, and it showed on the field, and of course ended up in his ultimate firing. So maybe that was the first step in trying to change the climate and right the ship and build some things around Jared Goff. We'll find out. But, man, Jeff Fisher really came across not looking good.
Yes, that's the big thing for me. And I'm looking at an article right now on FanRag Sports, and they have their top 3 surges and top 3 slumps. One of the people they have listed as a surge is somebody that we know locally, Kenny Clark. They think that he is going to surge in 2017. I didn't think that he played horrible as a rookie. I didn't get really wowed by his performance at all either. The Packers defensively, defensive linely especially, have not had a dominant pass rusher, let's be honest, since Reggie White was running around. I mean, KGB and those other guys and Aaron Campman, they did good for a while, but they weren't that elite pass rusher like Reggie White was. Can Kenny Clark evolve into a consistent, dominant pass rusher for the Packers?
I think he can, and without getting too Packer-centric here, that was one of the knocks on the Packers drafting him, is that he might have been a little bit more of a project. I think, which is part of the reason why I think the Packers didn't draft Watt and traded out of that pick and drafted a guy in the second round who's a little bit more NFL ready. I think Watt could be a star, but I think it might be 3 or 4 years down the road.
Yes.
Kenny Clark could be a really solid, top of the conference player, but it wasn't going to be last year, and it might not be this year, but you should start to see the signs of improvement of that. But I think that some people were down on him, especially fans that are Packer fans, because he didn't come out and he wasn't explosive like other first-round picks. But that wasn't the type of guy I thought they were getting when they drafted him in the first place.
No, exactly. I mean, let's be honest. If you have been following the Packers even a little bit, or even just casually from another NFL team's perspective, the Packers have drafted numerous defensive linemen in the last decade, and hardly any of them have panned out to be anything consistent. I mean, they just got rid of Dayton Jones to the Vikings after he was their first-round draft pick just a few short years ago. So you can see the turnover from a defensive line perspective when it comes to the Green Bay Packers.
Yeah, absolutely. The other players you start watching in their second and third year, because there's a very few guys that are wide receivers that hit their peak in their first year. Randy Moss was a freak of nature. Not everybody's Randy Moss.
No, not at all.
So this is the second year, and more so into the third year, is when you start to see those top first and second round receivers start to figure it out, because it's a tough game. You get into the NFL, not just physically. Obviously, physically, the players are better, they're tougher, but the amount that you have to digest in an NFL playbook, other than the quarterback, their wide receivers have the most they need to learn.
Yes.
Running backs, I mean, I'm not trying to diminish what they have to know for knowledge-wise, but basically they're more instinctive. Where's that hole? Where do I go? One cut, go.
Yep.
Receivers have to know routes. They have to know tendencies of the guys that are lined up against them, whether they know where they can play them out and in. They have to have some sync and some synergy with their quarterback. So it's hard for a first-year wide receiver to just come on and light the world on fire. So this is where you start to see those guys improve.
Well, that's the thing, too, with wide receivers. You literally have to know an entire play by, like, a point to the helmet or, like, one hand signal. It's like, oh, okay, I got to go do this now, and then block and cut back and all that, just by or even a word, too. I mean, Peyton Manning yelling out Omaha or Aaron Rodgers yelling out whatever he yells out. Like, you have to know that that all of a sudden changes the entire dynamic. And obviously the offensive linemen, let's not take anything away from those guys. They obviously have to know how to block, but their job, and this nothing against them, is easy because they have to take care of the guy in front of them, unless you're a pulling guard or something.
Sure.
But the wide receivers, like you said, you have to know everything through and through because you have such a dynamic thing that you have to do consistently.
And the other thing is, even the complicated offensive line schemes, there's guys working so close to each other, they can point out, you're there. So they work to wide receivers sometimes are on an island.
Yeah.
So they don't have somebody right next to them saying, hey, watch this guy here. He's going to take this gap.
Yep.
You've got him. They don't have the luxury of that kind of communication. And then they're out in, I hate this term, but they're out in space when they have to make their reads and they have to have their timing on. And again, they don't have that person right next to them that's able to help them out. So that, and again, just trying to learn the tendencies of your quarterback and know exactly, the speed that he throws the ball. Does he throw his ball a little bit lower, a little bit higher? The velocity of it. Tendencies when he rolls left or rolls right, knowing to come back to him. Those are all things that you can't possibly learn in mini camps, training camp in one season.
Yes.
Those are things that just take time to learn. And so this is where it starts to get fun for those top-drafted, top-tier receivers because they start to figure it out here.
Exactly, and that's the thing, too. You look at guys like Sterling Shepard and others, too, that were drafted by the Giants. Young possible talent that could, develop into something incredible. You're not going to get an Odell Beckham Jr. right out of the gate. You're not going to get a Randy Moss consistently. Those players are just once in a lifetime. You can't. That's why people, even in the NBA draft, like, oh, we're going to get the next LeBron James. No, that just doesn't happen. There's not ever going to be another exact copy of LeBron James. Even though they're like, oh, he's like Michael. LeBron is his own man, and Michael is his own man.
Exactly. I went to the LeBron James store. They had 3 left.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way.
No, it doesn't work like that. It's not like there's a new LeBron James coming out every decade, and someone's got to jump on him. There's always going to be those comparisons to, like, the next Tom Brady, the next whatever. Everybody's going to make their own legacy, and no one's ever going to be exactly the same as well. I wanted to ask you about the story that came out yesterday about Seattle looking at RG3 and Colin Kaepernick as possible backup quarterbacks. The NFL community has been divided about it. How have you viewed this situation?
Well, I've heard different degrees of interest in Kaepernick. I mean, he wasn't getting signed, and everybody thought that he was getting frozen out because of his political stance, and maybe he was by some teams because it still is a business, and if they think you can win a Super Bowl, they'll look past your politics and your publicity, and if you can't, they don't want to take some of that on. That's their right. Okay. However, then there were allegedly 3 teams that were looking at him as a backup. I think Colin Kaepernick would be one of the best backups in the NFL.
Yes, I completely agree.
I believe that he's at that very low end. You could start for a crappy team or you could back up for a really good team. And I am surprised he doesn't have a job, and I think he'd be a great fit in Seattle.
I agree.
I really do. RG3, I don't know that he can play anymore.
No.
I think he's been beaten up a little bit. I think physically he's been beaten up a lot. I don't think he had one good year. Kaepernick had a great year and a couple other good ones. It's not like he was just a one and done flash in the pan.
Yep, exactly.
I think RG3 might be a flash in the pan. So if I'm signing one of those 2 guys, it's Kaepernick.
Yeah.
Without a doubt.
And the big thing to think about in all this, too, is if you can't stay a sustainable quarterback for the Cleveland Browns and RG3, where are you going to actually go with your career moving forward? I mean, I know that there's certain guys that have gotten out of Cleveland that have had decent careers. Not great, but decent careers. Brandon Weeden and others are success stories, if you want to call that. But Colin Kaepernick makes the most sense. I do wonder about the division rivalry with the 49ers in Seattle, how that might play in. I know that there was a lot of Seahawk players that were very negative about Colin Kaepernick, not only with his protests, but also just at him as a player, too. Would that play into Pete Carroll and the administration's decision to potentially bring him in because there might be a division in the locker room?
Well, as far as as a player or the heat of the battle stuff, you get over that when you guys are pulling from the same side of the rope.
Yes.
If you think the guy can help you win. Again, players are the same as owners. If they'll overlook some of that stuff if they think you can help them win a ring or get to the next level. Mm-hmm. If you can't, then that becomes more of a dividing point. It becomes more of a thing that will separate the team. But if you can help them win, they'll overlook that. The thing is, though, Richard Sherman was one of the guys, and Thomas was one of the guys who supported Kaepernick in some of the stances. So, there's even some division within what the Seahawks think of him and his stance. I think he wants to put that past him. He even said, I'm going to stand because I think there have been significant changes. I don't know what's changed, to be honest with you.
I don't think anything has, honestly.
But he thinks that there have been significant changes made in the issues that he was protesting. So fine. So now he's not going to make it an issue anymore. Smart move on his part. Try to get past this as quick as you can. But if you bring him in, think of it this way. Seattle's got enough parts around him that if Russell Wilson gets hurt, and he misses 4 games, Kaepernick can easily win 2 of those 4 games.
And it's not like you're getting a totally different quarterback. How sometimes the drop-off is. So, God forbid, if Tom Brady goes out and you have Jimmy Garoppolo, they are 2 different quarterbacks. Russell Wilson, Colin Kaepernick, for the most part, are basically the same style quarterback. You can still run virtually the same, read option and all that fun business because they both know how to run it, and they've both been successful in it as well, too. So I think that's a smart idea from Seattle for just trying to be, okay, who's a guy that's going to come in and give us virtually the same thing if we lose Russell Wilson?
Yeah, another great point because you're right. Most teams don't have guys that are similar. Now it's hard to be Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers,
of course,
but you can find similarities in the way they play the position, but a lot of teams don't have that. You have one guy who might be strong at this and the backup's okay at this, and so it changes the whole offense. The worst ones are when you have a left-handed backup to a right-handed quarterback, especially from the way the ball comes out
everything.
And receivers having to catch the ball. It's blocking schemes. That's a really weird dynamic. I think if you have a left-handed quarterback, even if your backup is one notch down from the best right-handed quarterback you can find, you need to have another left. You just need to structure that system so that it makes sense. And I think you're right. In Seattle, if they sign Kaepernick, they do have somebody who's got similar traits to Russell Wilson. I think Wilson's the better player, obviously.
Right.
But you still have somebody who can fit that system, and you don't have to change too much.
One other thing, too, and you reminded me about this, and I just checked the interwebs of all their knowledge as well, and I haven't seen anything. The trade rumors of Richard Sherman have quieted down.
Mm-hmm.
I have heard nothing in the last, 3 weeks maybe? But that was the big talk of the town leading up to the draft as well, too. Is Sherman's going to go somewhere? What's going to go? Nothing went. Do we still see him moved before preseason begins?
I don't think so. I mean, it could happen, but usually all the trading stuff happens right around the period from 2 weeks before the draft to the week or two after.
Mm-hmm.
Now you start bringing
and we're 2 weeks removed now.
Right, and you're close to OTAs now. Now at this point, if you don't make the trade now, anybody you bring in after OTAs, they're behind.
Yeah.
So if you're moving forward with things now, they're basically saying this is the team we have, minus guys who might get cut late as roster casualties that you might sign, or with Seattle who likes to churn the bottom 20% of their roster and just keep. But other than that, your main pieces are in place once you hit OTAs and you're like, okay, this is what we're going to plan for as we head towards September. So you don't see a whole lot of changes there.
That is very true. All right, well, we got to get out of here, Scott. I appreciate you, of course, swinging by today to give us your insights and opinions. It's always a lot of fun to just kind of go back and forth with you, so I appreciate you taking the time to stop by.
I appreciate this opportunity.
Absolutely. A big thank you to Alfredo Moente as well for stopping by to give us the latest news about the baseball world. If you missed any of the show today, you can catch it here on our Facebook page, Brew Sports. Remember to go invite your friends. It's also available on our YouTube channel, and also on Spreaker.com and under iTunes and on iHeartRadio, and, of course, on our website, brewsportsnet.com. We're on all forms of social media. You can find me at Baxter Colburn. You are at Scott Wisniewski 2, correct?
Yes,
that's right.
2.
There's a second Scott out there.
Listen, I'll make this quick because we got to go. There's a Scott Wisniewski out there who is actually a Facebook friend of mine.
Oh.
Who is a decent guy. I think he friended me from radio stuff because I've never met him.
Sure.
But he says some things that are complete opposite on the sports world as me, so I have to always feel like I comment on things he puts,
right, not
just
me.
So people realize I didn't say fire McCarthy. That wasn't
me.
So yeah, Scott Wisniewski 2.
There you go.
Twitter.
Totally different. Perfect. Well, thank you all for tuning in. We hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Coming up later tonight is the premiere of our new golf show here on Brew Sports. It's tea time. Ken Williams and company are going to be here at 5:30 p.m. Central Time, so make sure to swing by for that. Tanner Burke will be back tomorrow on halftime at 11 a.m. Central Time, so swing on back for that as well, too. For Scott Wisniewski, I'm Baxter Colburn. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Thanks again. We'll see you tomorrow on Brew Sports.